Why were you trying to contact me?
You oppose the heretics, those that took the old machines as gods.
All kinds of organics fought Sovereign and his Geth allies. Why am I so interesting?
You were the most successful. You killed their god. You succeeded where others did not. Your code is superior.
Welcome to Superior Code, my solo podcast. I have the ASMR of like a storm blizzard going to set the mood for like one of the video games I'm gonna be talking about. There's always like a snowstorm happening. So I want to talk about how there is a difference between problematic stories and problematic characters. So just because a story has toxic characters doesn't make the story bad. So if the story isn't glorifying the characters and saying, hey, this is why we should think this way, and this is how the world should be, and this character's correct. If the story isn't saying that, then the story isn't problematic. But the story having these characters just simply existing in their stories doesn't mean that the game is bad for that. Like, I've become so tired of games where every single character is perfect and just a full-on feminist, and it's just kind of cringy when it just seems like the game is looking for cookies or high fives from other fellow feminists. And it's like, it's great when a character is like that in a story, but when it's every single character, I can't stand it. It's like, it's so obvious they want cookies. And I'm talking about games where it's not a cozy game. I'm talking about like a heavy story, heavy drama games. So I really appreciate it when games have a mixture of characters that need work, that are the villains, or that need growth to become better, to think differently, to break habits. So I like that when games have these characters that are not perfect. So, for an example, like other stories where there's bigoted, toxic fucking characters in a story, but doesn't make the rest of it bad, is like the Boondocks and South Park, because there are characters, Cartman and Riley, where it's like, these characters are in the show to be laughed at. They are in the show to show you they're wrong, that their way of thinking is the wrong way. You're not supposed to agree with their characters. They're the butt of the joke. So if you find people who really love their characters because they agree with them, they don't love their characters to laugh at them, but they love them to, they agree with their ideals, then that doesn't make the show bad. That doesn't make the show toxic. It makes the individual person toxic. Like, that's their problem. That's something they have to deal with and look into themselves on why they like that. And like, Married with Children, I think, is the show where you're not supposed to agree with the sexist husband. He's the butt of the joke. He's how you're supposed to not be like that. So when men really like his character because they agree with him, that's something wrong with them, not the show. So I want to talk about 3 games that are twisted stories that I really like, and are the most that I could find the most hate for these games online, and that's why I wanted to use them as examples, because they're the most hated of the games that I like. And that's The Suicide of Rachel Foster, Euphoria, and School Days. So I'll get into each of why I like these games and why they're problematic characters and not problematic stories. So I'll get into why but I want to just start and focus on the suicide of Rachel Foster. So I'm gonna go full spoilers, so if you haven't played this game, you can go and play it first and then come back. So let me tell you what the game's about to see if you're even interested. It's a first-person game, and like the game looks so beautiful, and this game is about a woman who goes to her family's old hotel to sell it, but ends up getting stuck there for days because of a snowstorm. So she's there alone. So that's the premise. If you're interested, go play it, and then you can listen to this. So, first off, you play as Nicole. So, not Rachel. So, the title isn't a spoiler. So, Nicole is a set character. She is not you, the player. You are playing a set character. And I think this is where the confusion and the outrage comes from, because people interpret it as, hey, how dare the game make me do this or make me do that or make me think this way, when it's not making you do that, it's Nicole. She thinks that. So we control her movements and choose how to respond sometimes, and at the very end we can choose to turn the car off or not. But Nicole's a character that can't be changed. The options are pretty much the same tone of voice when choosing a dialogue. Like, one is more sassier than the other option. So I think the game only gave us dialogue options, which is just 2 every time. Like, you have 2 options to choose from most of the time to how to respond. And I think it's only in there to make the game feel more interactive, and it works. Another game that does that is Life is Strange. It does that a lot in the Telltale series, where it'll give us like 4 to 5 different options on how to speak, but only like 2 of them really are different from each other, while the other ones don't really matter. It's the same as if you picked option 1. So it has a lot of conversations that just don't matter. They're just there to feel immersive in the story. So, and then sometimes there'll be a dialogue option where it was just 3 dots and we had no choice but to choose it. So I think it's just there for the player to press a button. So it's not just like a visual novel where you're just reading. It's there to like quick time events, basically. So the game isn't telling us that we can create a version of Nicole that we want just because there's options in it. So that's not what they're doing. If you were to go back and replay it, which you probably won't if you hate it, but if you were to go back, you will see, no matter which option you pick, she has the same attitude, but it's just depending on if you're going to direct that annoyance at the character on the phone or just direct the annoyance like to the universe. So it's basically, are you going to blame the guy or are you just going to tell the guy you're frustrated? So the game isn't telling us to agree with her. It's showing us this character's twisted, tragic story. Like the movie Hereditary. It's in the point of view of the victims. So Nicole is a victim like Rachel. So the next reason why I think this game isn't problematic is because Nicole is not in her right state of mind. I think I read that the people who worked on this game took inspiration from The Shining, where it's about a story where a guy goes insane because he's in a haunted hotel. And it's the same thing here. She is paranoid, she's starting to slowly go insane, and she just wants to leave, but she can't. Like, past trauma is eating away at her, and she's being manipulated by the only friend that she has there over the phone. So, if the game had Nicole clear-headed and she was in her right state of mind and she still felt sorry for her dad, then yes, the story would be problematic and it would be so sick for the game to be telling us that we have to feel sorry for this pedophile. But the game is not telling us that. The game is showing us the setting, showing us how she's clearly doesn't want to be here and how she's going insane. And for her to feel sorry for her dad, we're supposed to see this as we did with the movie Hereditary, as like, oh no, this is wrong. Like, these characters are victims and they're not thinking clearly. So Nicole was fucked up in the head a little bit before she even got to the hotel. She had past trauma. Like in the beginning of the game, she's reading a letter from her mom who passed away, and her mom says that they both never talked about their dad. Like, they never talked about her dad. So it's like trauma that she never like tried to heal from. She just tried to forget about it. And being forced to relive all of that trauma and remember and learn about things she didn't even know about, and she's all alone. So yeah, the game is telling us that place turned her crazy and we shouldn't be agreeing with her. So I don't see how people didn't get that message, but like I said, maybe they were confused by thinking the game was telling us we are this character because it gave us dialogue options, but it's not what the game is telling us. And when I was looking at like people's comments about this game, that was the biggest thing that annoyed me, is they would leave out the little detail that Nicole was going insane. They leave that out to new people so they could get high fives and cookies from other players and like, oh, good job for calling out this game. They just leave out the part that Nicole is not in her right state of mind, and they just love to lead with, oh, this game glorifies pedophiles and calls it a forbidden romance. And no, that's not what the game is doing. So I just wish that if you're gonna hate a game, you could still hate it even if it isn't problematic, but if you're gonna hate it, at least be honest with the details. It's like, despite the game telling me that the characters aren't thinking clearly, I still don't like this game. So just, I wish people would be honest with that and say that instead of trying to manipulate people into getting reblogs and retweets and thumbs ups. And because I want to keep comparing this to Hereditary, full spoilers on Hereditary. If you like horror movies, go watch Hereditary and then come back. So let's go over the obvious ways that this game tells us that all of these characters are fucked up in the head and that we shouldn't agree with them. And starting with the dad, he's a pedophile. And then later he starts believing in ghosts. 2, the mom murdered a pregnant 16-year-old and didn't tell anyone ever, even like when she died and left her daughter a letter, she still didn't confess that. It's something that Nicole had to find out on her own. And then Irving lost his big sister Rachel at a young age. He's younger than her, and he ends up staying at the hotel with the pedophile dad. Like, the dad didn't do anything to him, but it's still like twisted because he stayed with the dad and was basically brainwashed and blinded into thinking that his sister Rachel was loved by this man. And then he also starts believing in ghosts because the dad and Irving think that Rachel's ghost still lives, so, and that she's there. So yeah, it's like Irving was manipulated all those years into thinking that someone loved his sister because Rachel was called the R word and was just picked on by other people. And when he finally sees someone being nice to her, and it just happens to be this dirty old man, he thinks that it's real love. So, and then lastly, Nicole. She's suddenly taken away by her mom, not knowing that her important day was stained by it being the day Rachel died, and then finding out that her dad was sleeping with Rachel. Like, Nicole and Rachel are the same age, so at 16, she finds all this out. Like, she plays hockey, and then the day that, after the hockey game, her mom picks her up and is like, we're leaving your dad. And then she finds out later what her dad did, and then, like, right after her dad dies, she gets stuck at that old home, like her old home at the hotel, and with those tainted memories. With both parents dead, she feels alone. So, in the game, her mom died 3 years ago, and then now her dad just died, and that's when she goes back to the hotel to sell it. With both her parents dead, she feels alone, and all she has is this new friend, Irving, that she doesn't know that Irving is connected to Rachel. She doesn't know that Irving is in the hotel with her. It's just a voice on a phone, and that is the only contact she has. And then it's this new friend who is forcing a narrative on her already paranoid brain. And her past trauma is linked to that place and the storm, and Irving is keeping her there. Like, he steals her keys, and she just can't find them. So, yeah, that place is slowly draining her sanity. So, from all of these characters that are in the game, it's already telling us, the audience, that these are fucked up people. So, we're basically just watching Hereditary, where it's like, there's gonna be no survivors. So I want to go down the list on how Nicole actually slowly starts going insane, and like, to, just in case people hated this game but haven't played it in a while and just need a refresher on how believable it is that at the end she considers suicide or commits it based on what you choose to do. That there was a lot of people debating if, like, the ending even made any sense, or like it came out of nowhere, and I don't think it did. I'm gonna list a lot of reasons on why it made sense to come to this conclusion. So, 1, she lost her car keys, and it makes her and us think that someone else is in the hotel with her. 2, the staticky radio talks about victims in the last 3 days, tricking her into thinking there is a killer out there, but maybe, like, the radio was just talking about victims that were killed because of the storm. But because it was staticky and, like, cutting out a lot, we didn't really hear the full sentence, so it was like that on purpose to put doubt into her. Someone calls on a wall phone to scare her, versus like the cell phone. The cell phone is where Irving talks to her, and then the wall phone is not where he calls. So it makes her think that this is someone totally different, and their voice sounds different. Someone calls her to scare her and tells her to not sell the hotel, and that Rachel is still alive. And this happens right after Irving is questioned by her into, like, he says, like, that he says something about, like, the condition of the hotel in specific detail, and she's like, how do you know all this? How do you know all that? And he's like, oh, I've delivered stuff there and went there a few times, so it's what I do. And then after, she's like, yeah, whatever, like, she's just annoyed or suspects him. And then after you go by this phone, it rings. And then it's like, this is supposed to throw her off that Irving is innocent and there's actually someone else in the hotel that's not him. 4, she's not eating good. All she has to eat is like crappy microwave food and canned food, and she complains about it, and every time she eats, she's imagining she's eating something else. So, like, not eating well can really have an effect on your mood. 5, it's Christmas week. Like, not only is it a holiday that you're supposed to be spending with others, it's the same week Rachel died. It's the same week she learned about her dad, and from like the news clippings, like a gossip magazine, it's the same week someone thinks they saw Rachel alive. 6, day 3, she hears her dad's voice on the cell phone. Like, it's an old cell phone from the 90s. It's like one of those big block phones. So it turns out it's just Irving. He's like, wait, what? So at first she thinks she hears her dad, and then it turns out it's not him. So she's already hallucinating on day 3. And she has dreams and nightmares about her dad, and then she sleepwalks one night when she hasn't done it since she was a kid. When her dad talks to her in the dream / nightmare, it seems like he's talking back to her, like she's like responding to him and he's talking back and she's responding. But at the end, he says Rachel at the end. He says, I love you, Rachel. So, and that's when she like wakes up. 8, she sees a red butterfly leading her to like Rachel's fake room. So that's like another big hallucination. 9, she sees and hears a chalkboard write murderer, and it turns for her to read that. So an hallucination or some kind of mechanic set up by Irving. 10, she finds books on rituals and communicating with the afterlife in her dad's room. Her dad is like this intelligent man who's good with math, and it just makes it even more messed up that and creepy that he made the bad choice to sleep with a teen, but also that he believes in ghosts, and he's supposed to be like this intelligent person. So when she finds books like that in the room, it gets to her. 11, she finds a VHS recording of ghost hunters. Like these random 3 ghost hunters go into the hotel, record themselves, and them saying like, oh, living alone in a place like this all winter, you can't help but go nuts. Which is literally the game telling the players that's what's happened to Irving, the dad, and what's happening to Nicole. 12, seeing the door on that VHS film slam shut on the film to like scare the ghost hunters away and leave all the equipment there. And then after that ends, that same door she sees close in real life. And then later, towards the end of the game, all of the doors in the hallway close, slam shut at the same time. That's like after listening to her dad's recorded voice. So she starts thinking it's an angry ghost like slamming these doors and closing them. 13, the ghost hunting tool to hear sounds more clearly. So when she hears like it's either an hallucination or like a manipulation from what Irving is doing, making these sounds to lead her through like the whole town and everything to find these little clues. That ghost hunting tool is there so that she could hear better through the walls. And then the only light is flashing light from a camera. So the place is really dark, and you can choose to use a camera and just push it every time, just a flash of light to kind of see where you're going, or use a very loud flashlight. Like you have to keep pushing the button and it makes a loud sound every time to keep the flashlight on. So you don't really have a moment of like relaxing peace walking around with a flashlight. You have to keep pushing it, and it's very loud, very stressful, so that you never in the game get clear lighting. So that can like mess with you. 14, she hears different sounds randomly walking around the hotel alone. Some are close by, some are far away to make her think maybe she heard wrong, or maybe someone else is here following us. There's hidden pathways to hide, and then she mentions that she doesn't like tight spaces, but she has to go into these pathways when it's like she's kind of locked out and has to turn on the generator and stuff like that. Or it like tricks her that maybe it's not an intruder, but maybe it's ghosts. And then like on the last day, she starts to hear whispers. 15, Irene starts calling her Nikki instead of Nicole, like her dad used to. So that really gets to her, where it's like, by this point, she's leaning on Irving like a child does to their parent. So it's kind of like Irving is like the replacement for her dad for her, because she really loved her dad and misses her dad. She said so when she's dreaming that she misses him. And then when she thought she heard his voice, she calls out, "Dad?" Like hoping it's him, instead of like, "Oh, Dad." Like the game is telling us she never got any closure with her dad whatsoever. She just knows about him but doesn't know why. And then for Irving to start calling her that nickname like her dad did, it's very manipulative. And then 16, she admitted to being jealous of Rachel for like her music talent, and like Rachel was better on the piano and got her mom's attention, was like, "Oh, you should be more like Rachel." And then she talks about how during the ballroom, Rachel was wearing a very pretty dress, and that her father couldn't stop staring at Rachel. But at the time, she didn't take it the wrong way. She just took it as, oh, her dad thinks that Rachel's prettier in a dress than her being in a dress. So it's kind of linked to when in her dream, when her dad says like, "I love you, Rachel," instead of Nicole, that's where like that jealousy comes from. It's like, at the time, she took it more like Rachel was a replacement daughter, because she had no idea that there was like anything between Rachel and her dad. She took it as, my parents would rather have Rachel as their daughter instead of me, because Rachel's better at everything. So in 17, when she finds the room with the R word written on it, Nicole starts to feel bad for Rachel and starts believing she's alive, because like, why is there a room for her unless she's actually staying in it? So she starts to feel bad that she ever felt jealous of her after finding that room. And 18, Irving says that room and that her dad are sick. Like, he's like very good at acting like, "Oh, that's disgusting, that's sickening, that's creepy that you found that room, like your dad was sick in the head," saying. And then Irving, when they first Nicole was watching the VHS tape, Irving was like, "Oh, ghosts are total bullshit." He knows how to speak to seem level-headed, even though he doesn't believe it. So he's very much a good actor, and he makes Nicole feel guilty for being jealous and hating Rachel. Irving is just basically messing with her head to make her slowly feel sorry for her dad. And then 19, finding Irving's room and all of his setup just made Nicole snap. Like when she finds out he was there the whole time and that he had planned this, those pictures of her car and just plans on how to get her to stay there, and like he knew a storm was coming. It's like he had everything planned out to trap her there and to do this. And 20. Irving is Nicole's only friend and turns out to hate her. She wants to get on his good side again and be close. She doesn't want him to leave her like her parents did, believing anything he says. They talked about, like, before she finds out that he's there, they talk about, like, oh, we should stay in touch after she's able to leave that place, because she's, like, grown attached to Irving, and he says, oh yeah, we'll meet up again sometime. So she really, like, she likes Irving at this point, and then to find out that he actually never wanted to be her friend in the first place and just, like, hated her, she can't take that, and she, like, the tone of her voice, the sassiness completely disappears. She just wants to be on his good side, and she's broken at this point, and it's the end game. And when she finds out the truth that her mom was the one that killed Rachel, Irving says that he's gonna go, like, join Rachel, and you could hear that he's outside walking in the snow, and he's just gonna freeze to death, and he's just like, oh, we'll meet again. We'll meet, because he believes in ghosts in the afterlife. And when she starts, after that last phone call with him, and begging him not to leave her alone, she starts hearing sounds after that last talk, and then she just starts talking to herself in the car, talking to her mom, and then talking to Rachel. So that is why I think it makes total sense for Nicole to be suicidal. So at the end, you can choose, after you turn the car on, you can choose to leave it on or to turn it back off. So if you leave it on, she dies. If you turn it back off, you choose for her to live, but she's not going to sell the hotel. She still feels bad for her dad, and she decides to restore the hotel, but she's, like, broken already. So it's like she's going to be the new crazy person in charge of the hotel. So either ending, it's still a tragic one. But one of my biggest pet peeves is where people will list, oh, there's a good ending and a bad ending. Just because there are different endings doesn't mean one of them has to be labeled good ending and the other has to be labeled bad ending. So it's just two endings. That's all it is. It's just two different endings. Neither one of them is good. So they're both bad endings. Like bad as in sad ending. So I don't agree that the game romanticizes pedophilia. Everyone dies. How romantic. Wait, what? Like, no. Like, the game is creepy throughout the whole playthrough. It never felt romantic. Never. It was just sad, sick, and twisted. It's like, this is Nicole's journey learning about the full story, because she never got to when she was a child. Her and her mom just didn't talk about it. So this is what happens. This is just a story of, like, what happens if you just let trauma eat up at you and let, like, your paranoia get the best of you, and just basically The Shining. But instead of turning into a murderer, you just kill yourself. So this is just Nicole's story. And yeah, that's basically it. That's my whole point of, like, the game isn't problematic, only the characters. So the next example of that is Euphoria. I'm not going to do any spoilers, so you can just listen. It's a game that is about a group of students and a teacher gets kidnapped and wakes up in a room together. A voice talks on, like, an intercom and tells them the rules of how to get out, and it's basically like the girls are the keyholes and the boy is the key. So it's like, it's a porn game, and if they don't play, they die. So you play as the male student, the only male student, and you're surrounded by women, and you get to choose which woman has to suffer with you. So because this game is porn in eroge, it gets a pass for me for being toxic. Because I think anything goes in porn because it is a safe space for sexual fantasy. This one in particular caters to sadists and masochists. It's catered to that kink, so it's just porn with plot. Like, I'm not a sadist or a masochist because I had to, like, look away a few times. It's, like, really bad. But I just really love twisted horror stories, like Saw. So this is just like Saw, but it's porn. And it's, like, sexual acts that are, like, twisted versus Saw was just twisted, harmful shit. I think some people like Euphoria, but act like they hate it because it's porn. But they can admit, those same people can admit to liking Saw because Saw isn't porn. If you like Saw but don't like anime, then this isn't about you. I'm picking on anime fans who like Saw but say they hate Euphoria. So that's who I'm picking on. But yeah, that's basically why this is so interesting to me of a story, because like I said, it's Saw but porn. And this unfortunately is catered to men because you can only play as a male character. I did a whole episode on how disappointing it is that women don't have a lot of porn options when it comes to video games like men do. But yeah, that's a different topic. You can go and watch that episode about 18 plus Otome games being disappointed, I think is the title. So yeah. But yeah, this is, I still liked it because it was a twisted horror story, and then you find out why they're there, and it's a game with multiple endings, so sometimes you get the truth and sometimes you won't. So porn stories will never be important enough to have the moral of the story or like a secret message that this story is trying to tell us, because it's porn. It's just always gonna be bullshit fun. It's like expecting the pizza guy to fuck you or a girl getting stuck in a washing machine because you saw it in porn, so it has to be true. Like, no, it's just a plot for an excuse to have porn in it. This game isn't trying to give us a message. If it was trying, it failed the moment it becomes porn. My last example for the characters being the problematic thing and not the game story is School Days. It's a game about a schoolboy gets set up with his crush and by his female friend, but that female friend secretly likes him and then confesses to him later. So it's like she just set him up because she wanted points for him to think that she's a cool person, and she just thought he'd be too shy to actually go with, like, dating his crush. So that backfires on her, so she just ends up confessing anyways. So it's a game about relationship drama and temptations, and you play as the guy and you get to choose his actions. So it's a game with different paths and different endings, and it is a porn game. So it being an eroge just automatically makes it non-toxic. It's just a safe space for sexual fantasies. But the anime and the manga aren't porn, but I still don't think that the story is toxic even though porn isn't in it, because the manga and the anime both have sad endings, so it doesn't have a happy ending. So the story is telling us that the characters are wrong, so the story isn't glorifying what happens. In the game, you do have good endings and bad endings, so there are happy endings, but it being a porn game makes it fine. automatically makes it okay for you to do all of these things and then end up with a good happy ending, because it's just porn. It's just a fantasy. To this day, people still call School Days a sin because of the cheating, not the killing. That's what people are upset about. Like, killing is fine, but cheating is a step too far. Like, even though the story, like, if it's the anime or manga, the story treats cheating as a bad thing. So it's not problematic. It's just the characters that are. In the game, since it's porn, the story treats cheating like it's hot and exciting. Because it's porn, it has to be. So, I don't get how people judge others for liking School Days when it's like the whole reason they checked it out was because they heard about the twist of killing and violence, that it gets that twisted. That's the reason they checked it out. Killing is fine, guys, but cheating, oof, you're a bad person. It's like one of those things where it's like, this is a story about these characters, and these characters cheated. Like 50 Shades. 50 Shades is just telling the story of these characters. It's not saying that everyone is like that who's into BDSM. It's not saying that at all. These characters just happen to be into that. So, yeah, I don't get it. And also, 50 Shades is porn, so it also gets a pass. It's just sexual fantasy. So I just really wish people would stop trying to call out porn as problematic. It's just not gonna happen for like a lot of reasons, because it's just in the safe space of sexual fantasy. It has to be like, for porn to be problematic, it has to not be porn. Like, it's like a real live video of people not giving their consent for something to be filmed. Then it's not porn, it's just a violation of like their privacy, or it's like, you know, something illegal. But if it's like actual porn, like it's just has a script and everything, people need to lay off. Like, you don't like something, don't watch it. And for stories that aren't porn, but just have a twisted story, I really hope people start paying more attention to when a story is glorifying something and when it isn't. If the characters are not agreeable and they're in a creepy state, or like just not in their right mind, but they win, or they like basically the bad guys win, isn't the story telling us we should agree with the bad guys. It's just telling us this is a twisted story where it doesn't have a happy ending. And people don't need to justify their reason to hate something by lying and leaving out details. Like, leaving out, like, saying all of these problematic stuff about a story, but you leave out the fact that it's porn. Or saying all of these stuff about a problematic story, but you leave out that it's just the characters doing this stuff, and the characters weren't in their right mind, they weren't thinking clearly, and this is what happens. So you can't leave these little details out just to get digital high fives from people. I really wish people would just start being honest and just saying they hate a story because they don't like any story that has to do with, has a pedophile in it. They don't like any story that doesn't have a happy ending. They don't like any story that's like a revenge story or anything like that. Just say that. You don't need to have a good reason to hate something. It's okay to just hate it and just not be into it. You don't have to lie. So I really love twisted stories. So I want more of them in video game form. Like, I want more twisted, tragic video game stories without porn in it. And not just sad stories, but like twisted ones. I want more of that. I love horror. It's my favorite genre. Stories don't need like a hidden message. Like, it could just be bullshit fun. Like, there isn't one in like Breaking Bad, Game of Thrones, or The Walking Dead. They're just fun. They're just a story telling us these characters' life. That's all that is. It isn't no hidden meaning in them, and it's okay for stories to have that. Anyways, thanks for listening.